Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. In our last episode, we found out that World War II ended, and it left the King and Queen feeling tired and worn out. The King and Queen were praised by the people for all their support during those stressful years. The war's end found that the Labour Party took over the Conservative Party, and Churchill was forced to resign. So let's see what's happening today. The Duke of Windsor started to cause concern after the war ended. He announced his resignation as governor of the Bahamas at the end of 1944 and had left for the United States in 1945. Now everyone was wondering where he and the Duchess would live. His family didn't want him to live in England. Churchill told the Duke that although the King would always see him, Queen Mary was inflexibly opposed to meeting the Duchess, and I imagine that this view is shared by the Queen. That autumn, the Duke wrote an affectionate letter to his mother and said that he would like to come and stay with her in October. Queen Mary was happy, and she hadn't seen her son since he had abdicated. The Duke upset everyone when he started to give press conferences en route to London. The Queen's view was that he should have kept his visit private. The new Prime Minister, Clement Attlee, went to Balmoral for the Prime Minister's traditional autumn weekend, and the Duke was a topic of discussion. The King liked Attlee's attitude and told Queen Mary that the Prime Minister agrees with me that he cannot live here permanently owing to his wife, and he is not prepared to offer David any job here or anywhere. The King thought the family should remain firm, particularly about Simpson. She does not seem to like us or this country, and the life she's been accustomed to live no longer exists here. The King thought his brother still didn't realize the irrevocable step he took 9 years ago and the ghastly shock he gave this country. The Duke was wise and went to see his mother without his wife. Queen Mary was happy to have her dear eldest son with her for a week, and she said he was very nice. It was like old times. He was very well informed and knew everything that was going on. Queen Mary said that he was still persisting her about receiving his wife when he promised he never mentioned the subject to me again. His last words when he was going away, "Well, goodbye, and don't forget I'm a married man now. Don't forget indeed, if one ever could." And when the King came down from Balmoral to see the Duke, the Queen stayed in Scotland. The brothers spent 2 hours together at Buckingham Palace on October 6, 1945. He wrote his mother later that it was an amicable and quiet conversation, and it went better than the King and Queen had feared. The Duke said he was anxious to help improve Anglo-American relations when he returned to the United States. The King explained that as an ex-king, the Duke could neither live in Britain nor work abroad for the crown. His post in the Bahamas had been a wartime expedient. When they talked about the Duchess, the Duke said he should take all the blame for what happened in 1936, and if only the Duchess was recognized by the family, all would be well. The King said, "I could tell he wants to do his best for her in the future life together, but we cannot help him in this, and I don't see how we ever can." Queen Mary agreed with the King all the way. The Duke considered living in the United States, but in the end, he and the Duchess made their principal home in France for the rest of their lives. The King and Queen both understood the fundamental shifts occurring in Britain, and that these might affect the Crown's relationships with the people. The Labour Party's July 1945 victory showed that the electorate did not want to relive the misery of the mass unemployment of the 1930s. They had chosen a government committed to radical change and a huge extension of public ownership and nationalization of the means of production. The Labour Party had long ago made its peace with the Crown. Labour Prime Minister Clement Attlee was the opposite of Churchill. He was slim, a short man of few emotions and fewer words. He was precise and determined, and both the King and the Queen liked him. The Queen's thoughts about him later were, he wouldn't strike one as a star, but he was a practical little man. I think at first he was cagey, difficult to get on with, but then he got soon melted. But I think he was very practical, seemed to get a grip of things. But the King and Queen came to fear that at home the government was being too radical too soon. The King wrote in his diary that he told Herbert Morrison, Attlee's deputy, that the legislative program was too crowded. Morrison said that the government had to carry out its proposals as soon as possible. The King wrote to the Duke of Gloucester, "My new government is not too easy, and the people are rather difficult to talk to," but he always gave his government his support. The Queen had a romantic view of the country, one of which perhaps Britain's glorious history was more important than her present straitened circumstances. It was a challenge for the Queen to come to terms with the sternness imposed by Labour government. The King had to give his constitutional support to a socialist government, which was determined to create a social revolution in a badly battered country, and the Queen had to support him in this. But they both had misgivings. The first Christmas of peace was spent at Sandringham. It had been closed since 1940. There was a small party staying in Norfolk, and no one was in better form than Queen Mary. She seemed to be the life of the party, youthful, skittish, and generally rejuvenated, really full of fun and giggles. She was dancing at any chance and contributed to any jolly fun. Queen Mary said she loved resuming the old life and trying to forget the 6 horrible war years. In early 1946, they revived the pre-war practice of inviting people to dine and sleep at Windsor Castle. Dick Molyneux reminded the Queen that during George V's reign, the castle had become almost like a vast, empty museum, with their Majesties living in a corner, such a waste of that splendid space and establishment. He thought it must never happen again. At the end of April 1946, they had the Churchills stay at Windsor. After the weekend, Clementine Churchill wrote to thank the Queen, saying how honored and warmed they had been by the King and Queen's grace and kindness. On June the 8th, 1946, 10 months after the Victory in Japan Day, the official victory parade was at last held. 21,000 troops and civilians took part. There was a growing split with the Soviet Union and a bloc of countries it controlled, so there was no Russian, Polish, or Yugoslav troops present. The King took the salute in the Mall, and the Queen standing beside him. The next day there was a service at Westminster Abbey to give thanks for victory. When they went to Scotland, the Queen and the princesses drove from Balmoral to Clyde to spend the day at the Cunard liner, Queen Elizabeth, and that was a ship that had been launched in 1938 by the Queen herself. The liner had served as a troop ship throughout the war, and now the ship was going back to its original purpose. The Queen thought the ship was beautiful and comfortable. Queen Elizabeth was always interested in the state of the arts. Throughout the war, she had been concerned about protecting the artists and their work from brutal assaults of time. This was true of books as well as paintings, and she was anxious about the fate of the paintings and other works of art and the royal collection evacuated for safekeeping during the war. Now they were all being brought back and cleaned and restored where necessary. In autumn of 1946, she involved herself in an exhibition. It was called The King's Pictures at the Royal Academy. It was the first large art show to be held in London since the end of the war, and it was a great success. More than 366,000 visitors came to the exhibition. The Queen held a private view for the family and friends on November 20th, 1946. There was an unexpected supper in one of the rooms at the Academy. It was an enjoyable occasion. Queen Mary thought the mix of treasures and interesting people was a great success and very clever of Elizabeth to have thought of it, and the supper was a great surprise. The Queen was pleased. She enjoyed seeing the pictures well lit and well shown, and the occasion encouraged her dream to build a gallery at Buckingham Palace to show the royal collection on a more regular basis, and this was finally achieved in 1962. So I will stop the video here. In this episode, we had the Duke trying to get back into the royal family without much success. He visited Queen Mary, and even though he wasn't supposed to mention Wallis Simpson, he did, and that didn't sit well with Queen Mary. The King talked to his brother for 2 hours and set him straight on a few things since he was an ex-king, and the Duke had thought of moving to the United States, but he and the Duchess ended up in France for the rest of their lives. I like that the Queen was so involved in protecting the arts. She had an exhibition of the royal artworks and then had a private showing. It was during that occasion she came up with a dream to build a gallery at Buckingham Palace, and she did it in 1962. I'm glad she did. So I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it will help the channel out. And as I mentioned before, I have some Amazon items in the description part of the video, and if you see anything you like, you just click on it, and it'll take you to the Amazon site. And if you purchase anything, I'll get a small commission at no extra cost to you. More importantly, I wish everyone a great day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you.